The cell was dark, cold, and silent. The air smelled of rust and smoke, and the stone walls were damp as if they were weeping with her. She sat there chained, her arms heavy, her legs weak, her heart trembling with every sound from the outside. She was not just any prisoner. She was an alien warrior, once proud, once unbroken, now caught by the very enemy her people warned her about, the humans. Her people always spoke of humans as monsters. They said humans burned worlds, crushed enemies, and never showed mercy. They said humans found joy in pain. They said if you were captured, you would beg for death. So when the iron door opened with a loud creak, she closed her eyes, waiting for pain to begin, waiting for the cruelty her heart feared. But the man who entered was not screaming, not laughing, not holding sharp tools of torture. Instead, he walked quietly, his boots heavy against the floor, his face hidden under the dim light. He carried only a metal flask. He stopped in front of her, looked at her with strange eyes that carried no hatred, only silence. She stared back, confused, her chest rising fast. She thought, is this the beginning? Is this the trick before the pain? The man crouched down, lifted the flask, and without a word, he placed it near her lips. She hesitated, fear and thirst fighting inside her. The chains rattled as her hands tried to move, but they were locked tight. She thought he would laugh at her weakness. She thought he would mock her instead. He tilted the flask gently, letting the cool water touch her dry mouth. The water slid down her throat, sharp like ice, but sweet like life. She coughed, and he stepped back slowly, never striking, never shouting. Her mind screamed, why does he not hurt me? Why is he feeding me? What does he want in return? But her body felt a strange relief, a strange comfort she did not expect. She looked at him again, and for a moment, she forgot she was a prisoner. For a moment, she felt like she was just a living being, not a captive waiting for pain. He stood up, checked her chains, and she braced for the sting of a whip, the burn of a blade, but instead, he loosened the iron cuffs around her wrists, just enough so her blood could flow again. Her skin stung with sudden freedom. She almost gasped. He was not freeing her completely, but he was making sure she did not suffer too much. She could not believe it. The monster of stories was giving her mercy. The human said nothing. His silence was heavy, his eyes looked tired, old, as if he had carried battles inside him for years. She noticed scars along his arms, deep marks that told of violence, wounds that healed but never faded, scars that showed he knew what pain was. He knew it better than anyone, maybe even more than her, and yet he chose not to pass that pain to her. Her heart raced, not because of fear now, but because of confusion. She whispered in her own tongue, words he could not understand, words that meant, why are you doing this? Why are you different? He did not reply. He only adjusted the chain so she could lie down without choking on her own breath. Then he turned to leave, but before stepping out, he looked back once, his face still unreadable, his voice low, almost a whisper. Rest. That one word cut through her like a blade of light. Rest. Not suffer, not bleed, not die, but rest. The word haunted her mind. It did not match the humans she was told about. It did not match the picture of monsters who delighted in cruelty. She sat there in the shadows, her thoughts torn apart, her fear still strong, but something else was growing inside. Something she had never felt toward a human. Curiosity. The cell closed again with a heavy clang, and she was alone, but the silence was different now. It was not just chains and despair. It was questions. Questions louder than screams. What was this man planning? Why was he different? What would happen tomorrow? Would pain come later, or had her people been wrong all along? She leaned against the cold wall, her body shaking not from pain but from uncertainty. She thought of her people, of her training, of her pride. All her life she believed she knew the truth. Humans were beasts, humans were devils. But the hand that gave her water, the voice that told her to rest, those did not belong to a beast. Those belonged to something else, something she could not name yet. Her eyelids grew heavy. The chains rattled as she shifted. She did not trust him, she could not trust him. Yet for the first time in days, her eyes closed not from exhaustion but from something near peace. She waited for nightmares, for pain, but instead she drifted into sleep, the sound of his whisper echoing in her dreams, a whisper that promised safety even if she could not believe it. In that small dark cell, a war bigger than armies had begun, not between weapons, not between worlds, but between fear and mercy, between hate and kindness, between what she believed and what she was starting to see. She was still a prisoner, still in chains, still at the mercy of the enemy, but inside her, something new had been planted, a seed of doubt, a seed of hope. And so, The first night passed, not with screams, not with torture, not with pain, but with the strange memory of water, of loosened chains, and of a human who said only one word, rest. The cell door opened again. The sound echoed through the stone hall, and she woke quickly, her heart racing, her mind warning her that today the pain would come. Yesterday might have been a trick. Maybe he had only spared her for a while. Maybe today the truth of humans would show. She sat up, the chains rattling softly, her eyes fixed on the doorway. Waiting, the same human soldier entered, his face calm, his step steady, his silence heavy like a shadow. He did not carry a whip. He did not carry blades. He carried only a small pack. He placed it on the floor and crouched again. She watched him carefully, her eyes narrowed. She was a warrior, even in chains. She wanted to show no weakness, but inside, her chest burned with questions. He pulled out bandages, rough white cloth stained with dried red marks from old battles. She froze, thinking maybe it was a trick. But then he reached for her arm, the place where a wound from capture had never been treated, blood dried against her skin, infection creeping inside. She hissed as his hand touched her, but he did not strike her. He cleaned the wound slowly, carefully, like someone fixing broken armor. Her people said humans were merciless, but his touch was careful. His eyes focused not on her face but on the wound. His silence filled the room more than words ever could. She did not understand. She whispered in her language, "What are you doing?" He looked at her but said nothing, just wrapped the bandage around her arm, tying it firmly so the blood would stop. The silence unsettled her. It was not cruel silence, it was not mocking silence. It was something else, something deep. She tried to break it, asking louder this time, "Why?" But he gave no answer. He finished his work and pushed the pack aside, then handed her a piece of dried food. She looked at it, suspicious, expecting poison, expecting some hidden trap. But hunger gnawed at her, so she bit into it. The taste was bitter but filling. She chewed slowly, never breaking her gaze from him. He sat back against the wall, across from her, his weapon resting near his side, but his hands were calm, not ready to attack, not ready to strike. He just sat there, as if guarding, as if waiting. She studied him in the dim light, noticing again the scars that crossed his arms, scars that were not from winning but from surviving. Scars that told of battles where pain was no stranger. She wondered, if he knows pain, why does he not give it back to me? The silence became heavier, pressing on her like a second set of chains. She wanted him to speak, to reveal his reason, but he did not. His eyes only followed the flickering torchlight, cold but not cruel, distant but not hateful. She realized his silence was not emptiness, it was choice. He was choosing not to speak, choosing not to explain. And that choice burned her with curiosity at night. When he brought a thin blanket and placed it near her, she almost laughed bitterly. She thought, is this mockery? Do humans give comfort before they kill? Yet her body was shivering, and the warmth of the cloth was real. She wrapped it around herself, the chains clinking softly. She whispered again, "What do you want from me?" But the man had already turned, his back against the wall, his eyes closing slowly, his silence still the only answer. She lay there, staring at him in the dim shadows, her thoughts a storm. Her people taught her that silence meant planning. Silence meant cruelty, but his silence felt different. It was almost protective, almost like a shield. She hated herself for thinking it. She hated her heart for slowing down when he was near, for feeling something other than fear. She wanted to cling to hatred, but hatred was slipping through her fingers like sand. The next day, when another soldier came into the hall, loud and rough, she saw the difference. That soldier laughed cruelly, throwing words like knives, mocking her, calling her nothing, calling her alien filth. Her chest tightened, ready for the strike. But before the soldier could step closer, the silent human blocked the path. One glance, one step, and the other soldier cursed but left, his laughter fading behind the door. She blinked, stunned. The silence of one man was enough to hold back cruelty from another. Her chains rattled as she shifted closer to the wall, her voice barely a whisper. "Why do you protect me?" She thought he would ignore her again. But this time he paused, his lips moved, only two words came. "Not them." His voice low, rough, filled with something heavy. Then he fell silent again. Those two words cut through her. Not them. Meaning not like the others, meaning he refused to be the same, meaning he chose a different path. She lay awake that night, his two words echoing inside her mind. She thought of her people, of how they always painted humans with one brush. All cruel, all heartless, but this man with his silence, with his scars, with his strange mercy, He was breaking that picture piece by piece. She hated him for it. Because it made her doubt, it made her wonder. And doubt was dangerous, her heart was restless. Her fear still strong, but inside her chest, beside the fear, something else had begun to grow. Not trust, not yet, but something softer than hate, something fragile, something that could become trust if she let it. She wrapped the blanket tighter, her eyes drifting shut, and in the quiet darkness, she realized that silence could wound more than blades, but it could also heal. And so another night passed, not with screams, not with chains tightening, but with the sound of nothing, the sound of a human silence, a silence that made her fear less and wonder more, a silence that left her asking questions she never thought she would ask, questions that would change everything. The nights were long in the stone cell, time moved slowly. Sometimes she thought the silence would crush her more than the chains, yet every day the same human soldier returned, always quiet, always steady, always different from the others. He gave water, food, and even warmth, but still no answers, still no reason, and her mind burned with suspicion. Kindness from an enemy could not be real. It had to be a trick. Her warrior spirit refused to be broken, so one day when he loosened her wrists so the blood could flow, she decided to test him. She moved fast, faster than he expected. Her hands lunged at him like claws. She wanted to see if his mercy was weakness. If he would show his true face. The human did not strike her back. He did not raise his weapon. He simply caught her wrist and held it still, his grip firm but not cruel. His eyes calm, his voice steady. Enough. The word shocked her. No anger, no violence, only control. She pulled away, her chest rising, her breath heavy. Her pride wounded, she expected rage. She expected punishment, but instead he stepped back, giving her space. He did not tighten the chains again. He did not call other soldiers. He simply sat against the wall as if nothing had happened, as if her attempt had been a passing storm. She stared at him in disbelief, wondering what kind of enemy refused to fight back. That night she could not sleep. Her body was tired, but her mind restless. She thought of her people, of how they would laugh at her weakness. They would say she had grown soft. But was it weakness to question what she had been taught? Was it weakness to see a human not as a monster but as something else? The thought unsettled her, made her heart beat faster. She told herself it was only survival. She told herself she was only studying him to find his weakness. Yet deep inside she knew there was more. The next morning, he brought a small piece of cloth, woven roughly but clean. He handed it to her without words. She frowned, confused, then realized it was meant for her eyes. The infection from the wound had spread, and she could not see clearly. He dipped the cloth in water and pressed it gently to her skin. She winced but did not pull away this time. The pain was sharp, but the relief was real. Her lips parted, and for the first time she whispered in the human tongue she barely knew. "Thank you." He looked at her, surprised, his eyes softening for a moment. But still he did not speak much. He only nodded once, then returned to his place by the wall. That single nod felt heavier than 100 words. She turned her face away, ashamed of her own voice, ashamed that she had spoken gratitude to the enemy. Yet she could not take it back, and strangely, she did not want to. Days passed, and she noticed more. The way he always placed himself between her and the door, as if shielding her from the others. The way he gave her food even when his share was smaller. The way his silence was no longer empty but full of unspoken meaning. She began to wonder if silence was his language, if mercy was his way of speaking. Slowly her fear began to bend, not vanish, but bend, changing shape into something fragile and dangerous, something close to trust. One evening, when the sky outside burned with red light from distant battles, she asked him directly, her voice firm, "Why do you not hurt me?" He paused, his jaw tight, his eyes staring at the floor. For a long time she thought he would ignore her again. But then his voice came low and heavy. "Because I don't want to be like them." Her chest tightened. Those words cut deep. She realized he was not only protecting her, he was protecting himself from becoming the monster the war wanted him to be. She sat in silence. No answer came to her lips. Because for the first time she understood a piece of him. He was not sparing her because she was special. He was sparing her because he was fighting his own battle inside that night. The cell did not feel as cold. She watched him from the corner of her eye, the way he leaned against the wall, the way his head tilted back in exhaustion, scars catching the faint light, his face lined with fatigue. She saw not a monster but a man, broken yet standing, tired yet choosing mercy. Her heart beat strangely, faster, warmer. She told herself it was only confusion, only weakness. But the feeling did not fade. She remembered the stories of her people, Stories where humans were always villains, always cruel, always merciless. Yet here in front of her was a human who shared his water, who shielded her from cruelty, who refused to become the beast she had been taught to fear. Her mind screamed that it was dangerous, but her heart whispered something different. Her heart whispered that maybe monsters were not always born. Sometimes they were chosen, and sometimes they were resisted as the night stretched long. She wrapped herself in the blanket he had given, and for the first time since capture, she closed her eyes without fear of sudden pain. She still did not trust him fully, not yet, but a fragile thread had been tied between them. Thin as a spider's silk, easy to break, but strong enough to hold her heart in place. She whispered softly to herself. Words her people would never forgive. Maybe humans are not all the same. And in that fragile moment between chains and silence, between fear and mercy, something new was born. Not surrender, not peace, but the first fragile spark of trust, a spark that could grow, or a spark that could burn her completely. The war outside raged like a storm. She could hear the distant echoes of explosions, the ground trembling faintly under her chained feet. Every sound reminded her that she was not only a prisoner, she was also a survivor of a war that showed no mercy. Still, her thoughts no longer clung to the battles outside. Her thoughts circled only around the silent human who entered her cell each day, the human who broke every story she had been told about his kind that evening. He came again, carrying another flask of water and a piece of bread, his steps heavy but steady, his silence the same. Yet she noticed the weariness in his eyes, the lines on his face deeper than before. She wanted to ignore it. She wanted to keep her walls strong, but the words slipped out of her mouth before she could stop them. Why do you keep helping me? For a long moment, he said nothing, only set the bread beside her, his hand brushing the chain, checking it quietly. His silence pressed on her chest like a weight. She thought he would leave without answering. But then his voice came low and firm. Because I don't want to be like them. Her heart jolted. The words cut through the wall she had built. She stared at him, her lips trembling. Them, she whispered. The others. He nodded, his eyes dark. The war makes monsters. I don't want to become one. He looked at her directly now, and for the first time she saw not only scars on his skin, but scars inside his eyes, scars that no bandage could ever heal. She felt her breath catch. She wanted to deny his words, to call them a lie, yet her chest ached because she could feel the truth in them. His voice was not that of a liar. It was the voice of someone who had lived with too much pain. She turned away quickly, her pride refusing to let him see how deeply his words struck her. But the wall inside her had cracked, and she knew it. The next day he brought something new, a small piece of cloth folded neatly. She frowned, confused. Until he placed it in her hands, it was soft, warmer than the thin blanket she had before. For the cold, he muttered, almost embarrassed. She stared at it, unable to speak. She had expected iron, cruelty, pain, but he gave her warmth. It was so simple, yet so impossible for her to understand. Her fingers clutched the cloth tightly, as if afraid it would vanish if she let go that night. She spoke again, her voice hesitant. Why are you different? He paused, his eyes turning away, his silence thick. She thought he would not answer. But finally he whispered, Because once, I was a prisoner too. Her eyes widened, her heart thundering in her chest. She had never imagined a human could know the same chains, the same hunger, the same fear, but his voice carried no lies, only the raw weight of memory. For the first time, she saw him not as guard and prisoner, not as enemy and enemy, but as two broken beings caught in the same endless war, a war that took from both sides without care. She lowered her head, her voice soft. Then you know? He nodded. I know. And with those two words, another wall inside her crumbled. Another layer of fear peeled away over the next days. Their silence changed. It was no longer heavy. It was no longer empty. It became something alive. A space where words were not always needed. A space where trust began to breathe. He would share small pieces of food. She would eat without hesitation now. He would adjust her chain so she could rest easier. She would not fight him anymore. The fragile spark between them grew brighter. But not everything was safe. One evening another soldier entered, loud and drunk, his laughter sharp as broken glass. He sneered at her, calling her filth. His hand reaching for her chain, her chest froze with fear. But before the soldier could touch her, the silent human stepped forward, blocking the way. His voice thundered for the first time. Leave! The other soldier spat curses, but the look in his eyes showed fear. He left quickly, slamming the door. The silence returned, but it was not the same. It was charged with something powerful. something protective. She stared at him, her throat tight, her voice breaking. "Why do you protect me?" His eyes met hers, tired but unshaken. "Because someone once protected me." The words fell like stones in her chest. She wanted to ask more. She wanted to tear the truth out of him, but he turned away, his silence closing the door again. Yet that silence no longer felt cruel. It felt heavy with meaning she could not yet reach. That night, as she lay under the new cloth he had given, she thought of her people, of the stories told to children, stories of humans as devils, stories of chains and fire. But now her heart whispered a new story, one where a human with scars chose mercy, one where an enemy chose kindness. Her mind fought it, screamed that it was dangerous, but her heart would not let go. The walls inside her were breaking. Brick by brick, she was no longer only a prisoner, no longer only a warrior. She was something else now, something caught between hate and hope, between fear and trust. She closed her eyes, and in the silence she whispered softly, "Maybe mercy is stronger than war." And so, the cell that once felt like a grave began to feel like something different, a place where fear and mercy clashed, where walls fell, and where two enemies discovered they were not as different as they believed. The days blended together inside the cold prison, but something had changed, something quiet, something dangerous. She no longer looked at the human with only fear, no longer waited for him with only dread. She waited now with questions, with curiosity, with a strange unease that made her chest tight. He was still her guard, still her enemy, yet his silence, his mercy, had turned into something more. One evening, when the torches burned low, he placed a small scrap of paper on the ground between them. She frowned, confused. He picked up a piece of charcoal and wrote a word, a human word, simple and short, then pointed at her, waiting. She hesitated, then repeated the sound clumsily. His eyes softened, he nodded once, then wrote another word. Slowly she realized what he was doing. He was teaching her his language. At first she resisted, her pride stiff, her tongue stumbling over the sharp sounds, but something inside her wanted to learn, wanted to understand. Each night he would write words, and she would repeat, sometimes failing, sometimes laughing softly at her own mistakes. And once, just once, she heard him laugh too. A low sound, rough and strange, but real. And the sound sent a shock through her heart. She had never imagined she could laugh with a human in return. She began to teach him words from her own tongue, soft syllables shaped like wind and water. He struggled, his voice too rough for the delicate tones. But he tried, and when he failed, she found herself smiling. The chains around her wrists felt lighter in those moments, as if language itself was breaking them. But not all moments were light. One night a different soldier entered, his face full of hate, his voice sharp. He raised his weapon toward her, shouting insults. Her body froze, bracing for pain, but before the strike came, the silent human moved faster than she thought possible. He blocked the blow, his own weapon drawn. His voice thundered like she had never heard before. "Enough." The other soldier cursed, his anger thick, but he backed away, his eyes flicking nervously between them. When he left, the door slammed like thunder. She stared at the human, her chest rising and falling, her heart racing. He had not only given her mercy, he had risked his life to shield her from his own kind. Her throat was tight, her voice trembling. "Why do you protect me?" she demanded. His eyes dark and tired, he said only, "Because no one protected me." And then he turned away, falling back into silence. But she could not turn away from his words. They clung to her like chains, chains of a different kind. Softer, but harder to escape. That night she could not sleep. She stared at him in the dim light. The way his shoulders slumped in exhaustion, the way his scars caught the glow of the torch. She felt a strange pull inside her. Something she had never felt before, something her people would call weakness. But it did not feel weak, it felt alive. She wanted to hate him, but her heart would not obey. The next morning, he gave her half of his ration, a piece of bread smaller than his own. She frowned, pushing it back. "Why?" He shook his head. "Eat?" She hesitated, then took it, chewing slowly, her chest tight. Food had never tasted so heavy, not because of hunger, but because of the weight of his choice. He was starving himself for her later. When the night was quiet, she whispered in her tongue, words she never thought she would say. "I do not want to leave you." He did not understand the language, but somehow she felt he understood the meaning. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw warmth there, not just silence, not just scars, but warmth, fragile and dangerous. Yet the danger outside was growing. She could hear it. The war was coming closer, the soldiers' voices sharper, the explosions nearer. She knew their time was short one day soon. Either her people or his commanders would come, and this fragile bond would be torn apart. The thought burned her heart, making her want to cling tighter to the little moments they had. She taught him one more word from her language. A word that meant safe. He repeated it clumsily, his voice rough but steady. And she felt tears sting her eyes. She had never cried in front of an enemy. Never. But she turned her face away quickly, hiding the weakness, hiding the truth that was no longer weakness at all. It was trust that night she lay awake, her body shivering under the thin blanket, but her heart burning with warmth she could not explain. She remembered her people's warnings. She remembered her duty, but all she could think of was the human who shared his food, his silence, his scars. She whispered into the darkness. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe not all enemies are monsters. The cell was still a prison. The chains were still heavy. The war was still raging. But inside that small space, something unexpected had taken root. A bond between two enemies, fragile and dangerous, yet stronger than chains, stronger than fear, stronger even than the walls around them. And as the night stretched long, she realized the truth that terrified her most of all. She did not only trust him, she wanted him. Not as a guard, not as an enemy, but as something more. Something she could not name, not yet, but something she would never forget. The war outside was no longer distant thunder. It was close now, shaking the ground beneath the prison. Voices shouted in the night, weapons clashed, the air carried smoke and fire. She could feel it even through the stone walls. Soon the chains would not matter. Soon the cell would either be destroyed or abandoned, and she would face freedom or death. But freedom no longer felt simple, because freedom meant leaving him behind. The human soldier entered quickly, his face tense, his eyes sharper than before. There was no food in his hands, no water, only urgency. He looked at her chains, his jaw tight. She could see the decision burning in his mind, he whispered. We don't have much time. His voice was rough, heavier than she had ever heard. She froze, confused. Time for what? He knelt, pulling out a small tool, working on the locks that had bound her for so long. Her heart raced. The iron clinked as he forced it open. She whispered harshly, Why are you doing this if your people find you? They will kill you. His hands did not stop, his voice quiet. If I leave you here, they will kill you. I can't let that happen, she stared at him, her chest aching. But you will be a traitor. He looked up at her, his eyes steady. Then let me be a traitor. The chains fell, clattering to the floor, her wrists free for the first time since capture. She rubbed them, feeling the blood flow, the strange sensation of freedom making her dizzy. She looked at him, torn between gratitude and fear. If I go with you, my people will not forgive me, he nodded, his face grim. And mine will not forgive me either. But this war forgives no one, we can only forgive each other. Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream. She wanted to push him away, but her heart betrayed her. Her heart whispered that she could not leave him, not after everything, not after his silence. His scars, his mercy, she whispered back, almost trembling. Then where do we go? He turned toward the door, his weapon ready. Away as far as we can, together. The word together shook her more than the war outside. Her people had always told her humans and aliens could never stand side by side. Yet here was one. Choosing her over his own kind, she followed him, her steps weak at first but stronger with each breath. The corridor smelled of smoke. Bodies lay still. The war had already reached this place. Every shadow carried danger. They moved through the darkness, his hand guiding her when she stumbled, his silence still steady, but now filled with urgency. Once they almost ran into another patrol, loud and violent. She froze, fear clawing at her chest, but he pulled her back, pressed her against the wall, his body shielding hers. She could hear his heartbeat, steady even in chaos. She closed her eyes for a moment, realizing she trusted that heartbeat more than her own. When the patrol passed, they moved again, slipping through broken doors and ruined halls. The world outside was burning. Ships screamed across the sky. The horizon glowed with fire. She stopped for a moment. Staring at the destruction, her people were out there, fighting, dying, and here she was, standing beside a human, her chest twisted with guilt, with fear, but also with a strange relief, because she was not alone. She turned to him, her voice sharp. If my people see me with you, they will kill me. If your people see you with me, they will kill you. Why do we keep walking together? He stopped, his eyes meeting hers, his voice quiet. Because I would rather die beside you than live without you. Her breath caught. Her body trembling, the words struck deeper than any weapon. She looked away quickly, unable to hold his gaze. But her heart burned. She had no answer. No words strong enough, so she simply kept walking, her silence saying more than speech ever could. They reached the edge of the prison, the gates torn open by fire, the night sky blazing with war. The ground shook with every blast. He looked at her, his voice urgent. If we run now, we might live, but if we stay, we will both die. She clenched her fists. Torn between duty to her people and the bond she had found in him, she thought of her leaders, her warriors, the stories of human cruelty. But none of those stories matched the man beside her. She whispered, "If I go with you, I betray my people." He shook his head. "If you go with me, you betray war, not your people." His words echoed inside her like thunder. She realized this choice was not only about survival, it was about what kind of being she wanted to be. Someone chained by old hate, or someone free to choose mercy. The roar of engines filled the air. Soldiers were approaching. Time was ending. She looked at him one last time, his eyes waiting, not demanding, not forcing, simply waiting for her choice. Her chest ached, her heart screamed, and finally she reached out, gripping his hand tightly, her voice steady. "Then we choose together," and with that, they ran into the burning night. Two enemies bound not by chains, but by choice, their steps uncertain, their future unclear, but their bond stronger than the war that hunted them. The night burned like a second sun. Fire spread across the horizon. The ground shook with the march of soldiers. Human banners clashed against alien banners. Two armies moving toward each other, unstoppable, unyielding, ready to crush everything in their path, and in the middle of that chaos, two figures ran through the smoke holding hands, a human soldier and an alien warrior. Both fugitives, both traitors, both something new. She could hear her people's war cries, their voices sharp like blades. She could see the glow of their weapons in the distance, and on the other side she heard the thunder of human machines. Heavy and merciless, her heart pounded, her chest tight. She knew if either side saw them, they would be torn apart. Yet she did not let go of his hand. Her grip was fierce, unshaken. She had chosen, and there was no turning back. They reached a ridge, smoke curling around them. The battlefield spread out below, soldiers charging, fire raining from the sky, screams mixing with roars of engines. It was madness, pure madness, and yet in that madness she felt clarity. She felt the truth that had grown inside her since the first day in the cell. She whispered, her voice breaking. "This is what hate creates." He nodded, his eyes dark, his scars burning in the light. "Yes, and this is why I refuse to be like them." But fate gave them no time for quiet words. The army saw movement on the ridge. Weapons pointed, shouts rose, human soldiers aiming their rifles, alien warriors raising their blades, both sides ready to kill, and there they stood, trapped between two worlds that hated each other, the end rushing toward them like a storm. She felt fear claw her throat, yet she stepped forward, her voice carrying louder than she thought possible. "Stop!" Her own people hesitated, stunned to see her alive, stunned to see her standing beside a human. The humans shouted in confusion, some lowering weapons, others raising them higher. The silence of hesitation fell across the battlefield. Heavy and dangerous, the human soldier stepped forward too, his weapon lowered, his voice rough but strong. "Enough," he shouted. "This war will only make more monsters." His words echoed strangely across the ridge. Some soldiers cursed, some laughed, but others froze, their eyes shifting, their grips trembling, because deep inside they knew the truth of his words. Her people shouted at her, calling her traitor, demanding she step away from the human. Her chest ached. Tears burned her eyes. But she shook her head, her voice fierce. "I was chained by humans, and one of them gave me mercy. He gave me life, not pain. If he is a monster, then I want to stand with monsters." The words ripped through the air like lightning, shocking even herself, but she did not take them back. The human tightened his grip on her hand, his voice rising. "She waited for pain from me, but I gave her mercy. I chose not to be cruel. I chose not to be what war wanted me to be, and if that makes me a traitor, then I'm proud to be one." His voice shook with fire, his silence gone at last, replaced by words that could not be contained. The armies shifted, uncertain, anger clashing with doubt. Orders shouted from commanders, but soldiers hesitated. They looked at the two figures on the ridge, two enemies standing side by side. And in that sight, the war lost its certainty, because if even one human and one alien could choose mercy over hate, then the lies told by leaders cracked like broken glass. Blades did not fall, rifles did not fire. The battlefield froze in tension. Her chest pounded, waiting for death, waiting for betrayal, but none came. The silence stretched long, heavier than any battle. Until at last some weapons lowered, not all, but enough. Enough to show that doubt had entered the hearts of warriors on both sides. She turned to the human, her voice trembling. "We cannot stop the war tonight, but we can show them another path." He nodded, his eyes steady, his grip firm. Together they stood, not hiding, not running, but facing both armies with nothing but truth between them. The night dragged on. The war did not vanish, but in that moment something changed. Whispers spread through the ranks. Whispers of a prisoner shown mercy. Whispers of an enemy who protected instead of killing. Whispers of a bond that broke chains stronger than iron, and whispers once born could never be killed. As the dawn crept over the smoke, painting the sky with pale light, she felt the weight of her choice settle deep in her soul. She had not betrayed her people. She had betrayed hate, and that was a betrayal she could live with. Her hand still in his, her heart steady, she whispered softly, words only for him. "I waited for pain from the human, but I found something else. I found hope." And as the sun rose over the battlefield, hope shone brighter than fire, brighter than chains, brighter even than war itself.